So, many of you may or may not have heard of this little game called Dishonored. For years now, it's been on my top 10 list of games ever made, and over that time, it's received some pretty heavy praise, and really, how could it not? It's a game where you're jailed for going to the worst Facebook meetup ever, I mean, being framed for the murder of your empress, and are then given powers by a whale god who, and I quote, just wants to see what you do with them. And he looks like the type of guy who's gonna gaslight me while I play Valorant. In Dishonored, you very quickly find yourself basically becoming supernatural Batman, jumping from rooftops, sneaking around guards, dispatching them with ease, all within this nice Hitman style package where your only goal is to go in and take out your target, and the rest of it's up to you. The game is absolutely gorgeous even 10 years after release, set in the fantastic whale oil punk world of Dunwall. It's like an oil painting come to life. Oh my god. While I could gush over the art style all I want, I really want to use this video to show you an aspect of Dishonored many people praised it for at the time, but really never talked about how it perfectly captures a dilemma we're all familiar with in fiction: the morality of taking a life.
Why on God's earth is he still alive? Ignoring what he's done in the past, the entire graveyards he's filled.
How will you end his reign? By blood or by truth?
What, your moral code just won't allow for that?
No! God almighty! No. It'd be too damned easy. All I've ever wanted to do is kill him. But if I do that...
What choice did you have?
If I allow myself to go down into that place, I'll never come back.
But once we started ordering deaths, I guess it just became a habit.
Why? I can't. I'm sorry.
Well, you won't have a choice.
What will you do, I wonder?
So with the intro out of the way, let's get into it. Dishonored's been able to do something that many other games with morality systems fail to do, making the impact you're having on the world not only feel real, but the game's world changes you just as much as you change it. And while that sounds absurd at first, let me know if this sounds familiar. I found that in my many playthroughs of Dishonored, I'd always start my run staying in the shadows and just being as non-chaotic and as much of a morally righteous person as I can. But there's always that one slip-up moment where you turn the wrong corner or you just miscounted how many people are in the room. Regardless of how it happens, there's a guy in front of you that shouldn't be there. You have to make a split-second decision between killing one man or getting caught and all hell breaking loose. And I've noticed that with me. Mr. FBI agent, could you please just skip ahead in the video, because I have to confess here, I almost always kill the guy. I didn't mean to kill him. And I don't know what that says about me, but it creates a chain reaction for the rest of my playthrough, where one body becomes 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then there's a mountain of corpses, and everyone I look at is nothing more than a target and a piece of meat to be looted, pillaged, and burned, and thrown to the rats. Oh my god, this game makes me a monster. And it's that exact downward spiral that I want to talk about today, because I believe that's a completely intentional experience, and I can prove it. Around the time that Dishonored was being developed, shoving a morality system into your game was not only really common, but it's something that we still see today, and more often than not, they're getting thrown into sandbox games like Watch Dogs, the Infamous series, and most recently, Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, there are plenty of good reasons to add a morality system into your game on the surface. It's a really easy way to get you to care about how you interact with the world you've found yourself in. It allows for branching storylines and really can create a sense of agency in the player, but after playing through far too many of these games with tacked on morality systems, I'm not convinced that any of them come anywhere close to handling morality as perfectly as we see it in Dishonored. More often than not in these other games, the choices you make are very binary and basically just black or white, good or evil. And while that definitely works on a surface level, it really leaves a lot on the floor that Dishonored picks up and uses. With these other games, even though the world changes around you, it's pretty lackluster when you think about it. If you've been a bad little boy, your lightning's gonna be red, and if you've been a good dude, you're gonna be whiter than Mark Zuckerberg. Your morality becomes less about the choices you make and how they affect you and the world around you, but at best, this type of morality just adds another currency to the game. If you're good, you can get this type of attack, and if you're bad, you can get this type of attack. And at its worst, it's just kind of tacked on for seemingly no reason, looking at you, Red Dead. And it's these types of games that never want you to forget, even for a second, that your actions are being judged by providing a meter for how moral or immoral you're being. And it's the inclusion of this meter alone that's in literally every morality-based game that completely diminishes any reason to have these systems in the first place, because now the morals aren't in your hands, but the game's. When every single action you take is given a karma score of plus or minus, and then you're immediately shown it, you're no longer making choices based on the morality, but instead just what abilities and ending you're going for. And I think Dishonored noticed that it's this really popular approach to morality that really just turns it into another form of currency instead of what it should be. A personal and nuanced experience that only you can have in the game.
I'm a real boy!
And that's not to say there's anything wrong with playing games that way, and that people certainly have played Dishonored to get certain endings. Hell, I even have. But it's extremely reductive, and Dishonored knows that, and was clearly designed to mitigate that experience as much as possible through putting as much of the morality meter on the player as they can, and really just kind of disguising it in the world itself. You see, Dishonored doesn't really have a morality system. It has a chaos system, where the morality of your choices really doesn't matter that much, but instead how chaotic and loud you decide to go through your missions. Oh, one of them saw me. If you leave a trail of bodies in your wake and you get caught constantly, you're gonna have a high chaos rating, and vice versa. How you decide to take out your targets and the punishments that you inflict on them, lethal or not, rarely if ever affect that chaos rating. So you're probably wondering what the hell I'm talking about with Dishonored's morality system if it seemingly doesn't even have one, and that's where Dishonored is absolutely genius. In a lot of ways, Dishonored is a game whose one and only goal is to tempt you and corrupt you with the ultimate power, the ability to kill beautifully. Seriously, the animations are a grotesque artwork, and every takedown and animation is so intoxicatingly beautiful with the exaggerated yet powerful movements that they feel not only good to look at, but honestly give you such a sense of power while you're doing them. It's addicting. Once you start to master the movement in this game, you feel like a trained assassin, hiding in the shadows, stalking your prey, or choosing to avoid it. There's just something about the slight cartoonish nature of every single movement in this game that hits that dopamine button in my brain and makes me want to see more, just like you with that subscribe button. Go ahead, click it. I'll wait. Thank you. With Dishonored, you're constantly running into enemies and therefore given so many opportunities of temptation to see those pretty red colors. In my experience, nearly every second of gameplay is not only a test of will and wit to remain undetected, but also to hold back that sweet, sweet desire. While playing the game, you'll notice it's debatable whether morality is even part of the narrative, because frankly, a lot of the non-lethal punishments are fates worse than death. I mean, a permanent branding that essentially banishes you from society, or drugging your target and then handing them off to a masked creep at a party to who knows where? These aren't exactly morally righteous actions taken by a hero, but a brutalist. Someone who not only hurts people, but seemingly likes it. Maybe Batman isn't always the good guy. Yet while playing Dishonored, despite not having a meter constantly reminding me whether or not my actions are wrong or right, I still noticed feeling good or bad about my choices, and for a long time I couldn't really make sense of that, until I realized that true genius of Dishonored I mentioned earlier. You see, the game actually does have a morality meter, it's just not as in your face as other games, because the morality's hidden in the gameplay and world itself. Because you gotta remember, the Outsider's basically a really fucked up Uncle Ben, but instead of trying to sell you rice, he's an eternal whale god who's really just trying to see what you do with the powers that you've been given. And it's that very familiar question of what you do with great power that is a theme with the entire story. The characters around you are constantly faltering to the powers that they're given. The game literally goes as far to tell you this directly, with one of the 3 co-conspirators that goes against you later in the game flat out admitting it.
We had the best of intentions. But once we started ordering deaths, blackmailing those in power, and all the other things you're not supposed to do, well, I guess it just became a habit.
And then the game tries to get you to falter just as much as they did. It takes 2 seconds looking at the abilities given to you to see that there's very clearly a lean towards being a psychopath. Whether that's by summoning a swarm of rats to eat your opponents, or just simply stabbing them and turning them to dust, nearly every single ability offered to you is just a tool to get rid of your enemy as quickly and lethally as possible. The true genius of Dishonored is that instead of having a meter popping up and telling you, wow, you're an asshole, it's through your own interpretation of the world that you begin to find yourself in that determines how you feel about it and really what your morals are. When offered to help someone in need, did you? Did you succumb to the temptation of taking a life, or did you rise above it? The beauty of that is that the game didn't need to assign every single action a good or bad morality system. With Dishonored, you're put in the shoes of someone who's been, wait for it, dishonored. It presents you with this corrupt, grimy world that you're on a revenge quest against, and how you seek that revenge is seemingly completely up to you, and as if the temptation with that isn't enough, you're given some insane powers. You're gonna go down to a very dark place if you're not careful. And I think it's the way in which this game incredibly blurs the line between protagonist and player, that when you play through Dishonored the first time and you see the choices that you make, you see a glimpse of who you really, really are. Because in Dishonored 1, Corvo is just as much a blank canvas as Link is. The way that the story is able to perfectly line up with your motivations as a player, regardless of how you interact with the world, is a stroke of genius and is responsible for one of the most immersive experiences that I've had in gaming ever. And it's a huge reason why I think this game has affected me and so many others so profoundly, because as stupid as it always sounds that the Batman would never kill the Joker, someone who the world would undoubtedly be a better place without, you really understand why Batman doesn't do do it, because it would be so easy to justify doing that and so much more. But there's always the question of, until what end? After the bodies are hung out to dry and there's no one else to stand up against you, what is the world that you're left with? And much more importantly, do you think you could live with it? Thanks for watching.
Blood in our veins, in the air, and our chest.